Madam Speaker, the world needs more clean, responsible, low-carbon energy. And not only does the world need Canada's world-class energy, but Canadians need it too. They need it not only just to heat their homes and keep the lights on and to fuel our vehicles, but for the economic benefit that it brings along. After 8 years of this incompetent Liberal NDP government, they're just not worth the cost for Canadians or our resource sector. Canada is last among developed countries for GDP per capita growth. Canadians are suffering with the worst GDP per capita growth rate since the Great Depression, Madam Speaker, since the 1930s. GDP per person in Canada today is just under what it was halfway through 2018. That means Canada has had 5 years' worth of economic productivity wiped out. According to the OECD, Canada will remain last amongst developed countries for GDP per capita growth through 2060. This government has been doing one thing very well, chasing investment out of our country. And like our leader once said, all of our exes are running away to Texas. This costly Liberal NDP coalition has been chasing not just investment, but jobs and people and talent out of our country as well. People do not want to move to this country because they don't see a future here anymore. When my family came here as immigrants, there was a hope in Canada that if you put in hard work, you would be able to see the fruits of that labor. But after 8 years of this Liberal NDP Prime Minister, all that hope has been wiped away by bad economic policy that's told the world Canada is not open for business anymore. And this unjust legislation will further hurt Canada's economy and reputation on the world stage if this Prime Minister's reputation already hasn't damaged Canada enough. The Coalition of Concerned Manufacturers and Businesses of Canada was formed just a few years to advocate against this government's anti-competitive and anti-worker policies. Now half of their manufacturer members have already moved or are moving their operations out of Canada. The green industry in Canada won't even make a dent in the kind of economic development and growth that is needed for recovery. In 2007, the clean tech sector was 3% of Canada's GDP. Today, even after billions and billions of tax dollars in government subsidies and billions more in private sector investment, it is still only 3% and 1.6% of employment. Despite the anti-energy agenda by this Liberal NDP government, the unconstitutional No More Pipelines Bill C-69, the tanker ban C-48, cancelling Energy East, cancelling Keystone XL, and not building any of the 18 LNG projects proposed when this Prime Minister took office, Canada's energy sector still represents 10% of our GDP, and with the related manufacturing that comes with it, contributes over $120 billion to our economy. Canada needs our energy sector to be strong to attract businesses, investments, and jobs in Canada, to get our economic growth and productivity back on track. This Liberal NDP government loves nothing more than to vilify profit or the success of large Canadian industries. When it comes to Canada's energy sector, it's like a sport for the left to see who can hate it the most. And there is a big cost to these failed Liberal NDP policies, these anti-energy, anti-Canada policies. These attacks will throw at least 170,000 people out of work across the country, many of them in my home province of Alberta and many in my riding of Calgary Forest Lawn. It will displace another 450,000 workers and risk the livelihoods of 2.7 million Canadians in all provinces, sectors, and regardless of whether you are working class or middle class. We know that people will lose jobs with this unjust transition the left is proposing. We saw it already in Ontario under Kathleen Wynne. With the Green Energy Program, it killed off nearly 100,000 jobs directly, and the 50,000 green jobs those Liberals promised to create, they never materialized. In Alberta, the Rachel Notley NDP in 2015 implemented a just transition, and in small mining towns like Hanna, just north of Calgary, Workers were promised new green jobs once their coal mining jobs were wiped out. Just like in Ontario, over 1,000 workers left town because the jobs that had been promised just weren't there. This is in a town of just under 3,000 people, and they drove 1,000 people out of work and out of that town. The sheer number of job losses we are talking about on a national scale is devastating, especially at a time when Canadians face a cost of living crisis. 60% of Canadians are choosing cheaper, less nutritious food because they can't afford healthy options. Millions of Canadians are visiting food banks as families choose between keeping a roof over their head or food on the table. Nearly a third of mortgage holders are concerned they won't be able to afford their mortgage, as interest rates could increase monthly payments by 40% or higher. It's not just the jobs, livelihoods, and communities that suffer when the Liberal NDP government attacks our energy industry. It's also hurting Canadian pensions. The Canadian Pension Plan and the Ontario Pension Plan invest billions in Canada's oil and gas sector because they know it's a good return on investment. In fact, 7 of the largest pension funds in Canada remain invested in Canadian oil and gas. By firing energy workers and attacking our world-class energy sector, the Liberal NDP coalition is attacking the retirement security of Canadian seniors and workers. And there is a huge impact of this unjust transition on communities and Canadians. There's nothing fair, equitable, or remotely just in this blatant anti-energy attack. This Liberal NDP government and their war on Canadian jobs and paychecks is not worth the cost. Canadian energy companies provide good-paying jobs, even good union jobs for Canadians. As an example, the Keystone XL pipeline, the project was to employ 1,400 direct and 5,400 indirect jobs in Alberta alone. The province and TC Energy partnered with Natural Law Energy, an Indigenous-led and run company. Many of the Canadians who worked on the project were Indigenous. The economic benefit for Albertans in surrounding rural communities kept people employed and businesses running. Canadian energy companies are also leaders in the investment and development of clean technology. 75% of private sector investment in clean technology comes from the oil and gas sector. Canada's energy sector contributes $48 billion in taxes and royalties to all levels of government. These continuous attacks on our energy sector drive up the cost of gas, groceries, and home heating. We don't need to go very far to ask any Canadian, as we talk to Canadians all across this country, who just last winter were hit with the failed policies of the Liberal NDP government, when we saw the cost of heating homes doubled. We saw gas prices at record levels. All of these things are contributing to the cost of living crisis we see today with this failed carbon tax scam that the Liberal NDP continue to introduce. But, Madam Speaker, it wasn't like this before this Liberal NDP government, and it won't be like that after this Liberal NDP government, because when the member for Carleton becomes Prime Minister of this country, we're going to bring it home. Conservatives will bring home energy production to Canada to produce energy here, create jobs and get Canadians good paychecks instead of giving dollars to dictators. We will green-light green projects like tidal water, hydro, hydrogen, and LNG. We're going to make sure that we can support our seniors by axing the failed carbon tax to bring down the cost of gas, groceries, and home heating and bring home lower prices. We're going to bring it home for Canadians. Thank you, Madam Speaker.